I wonder what kind of video I should make. I haven't uploaded to this channel in a while, and I think it's time that I switch things up a little. I hate it when I see other people make videos about movies and, just making fun of them, so, maybe I should do that. Welcome back, everyone. This is Deathstroke9, and today I'm here to ask you, do you know what the worst movie of all time is? Me neither. But today, we're going to be taking a look at one of, in my opinion, the worst Dungeons & Dragons movies of all time. So yeah, stay tuned for that. So I've been watching a lot of D&D movies recently. There were two that came to my attention that I think, as I explain the one I'm talking about, you'll know why I don't particularly love it. Now, keep in mind, I'm an avid D&D player. I love tabletop role-playing games, so that probably is one of the reasons why. But there were two movies. One was called Mazes and Monsters. It was Tom Hanks got his first feature role in this movie. But yeah, that one was super serious. We're going to be checking out a comedy called Zero Charisma. And that name kind of gives you everything you need to know about this entire movie. So I'm excited to check it out with you guys. I've watched it way too many times now. So I'm excited to share all of that wonderful knowledge with you guys. We're going to be looking at the whole movie, and then I'm going to be telling you why exactly I think that this is one of the worst, if not the worst, D&D movie ever made. Now, we open in, I guess, a dollar store, and we're going to meet our main character, Scott Wiedemeyer. Of course, as a typical nerd or geek or whatever, he's a big guy who's, playing heavy metal music through his earbuds and is super passive-aggressive to the people he meets.
No.
Yeah, so this is Scott. He is our main character, and you're gonna love him, I promise. You're gonna love him. You're gonna love him. So this next scene, Scott's driving around and he's got his friend with him. Now his friend's name is Wayne, and it's kind of his best friend, but Wayne is a little bit of a pushover and Scott is kind of mean to him. And then eventually they get back to the house where he was at the dollar store to get snacks so that they could play D&D at his place. So here we are, Scott, Wayne, and a bunch of their friends who really aren't super important. And these people are all the D&D players in this movie. These are the D&D players. These are the nerds, these are the geeks, and they're all made out to be complete losers, pretty much. Now, as a game master myself, I find it a little bit difficult to watch some of these scenes, and there's one in particular that comes later, which I can't wait to get to, but it's painful to see this guy be so passive-aggressive, or just all straight-out aggressive to everybody around him.
To a bloody, smelly heap.
Yes.
The captain
Hello to my little friend.
The captain of the guard approached.
I'm healing.
I know. The captain of the guard.
He's one of the most unlikable characters in anything I've ever seen. He's more unlikable than the villains in a lot of movies that I've watched, okay? Now, I'm guessing the concept of this movie, or one of the ideas behind it, is that we're kind of supposed to hate Scott, which is why we almost rejoice as he, as life just kind of takes his world and rips it apart, which is kind of this is Scott Wiedemeyer's world being ripped apart is this entire movie. It's like a movie where we're supposed to hate the main character, which that just seems like such a bad idea. The main character is supposed to be the person that you like in spite of their flaws. But this character has no redeeming qualities. None. But yeah, so he's kind of a jerk when they're playing D&D. Then his grandmother comes down, all right?
The gal works in there. I don't know where she's from, but I don't understand a word she says. Then she gives me grief like it's my fault she can't understand English.
His grandma's name is Wanda, and she owns the house that he's living in. So he's living with his grandmother. And he's playing D&D with a bunch of his adult friends in her dining room, I guess. And she comes out, and she's trying to make herself a sandwich. And she comes out and she's like coughing and just being loud and obnoxious. So naturally, Scott goes up to her and in her own house tells her to, go back to her room and not disturb them while they're playing the game.
Listen, mister.
Obviously this is pretty disrespectful, and she's like, this is my house, which, it is. So they're having a little argument, and eventually, he's gonna try to come back to playing the game. But while this is happening, one of Scott's friends, not Wayne, a different one, gets up and kind of walks away. He's got a phone call he needs to make. So then, when Scott finishes talking to his grandma, he goes and talks to his friend who's in another room. This friend is getting a divorce.
Go ahead, I'll be there in a sec.
No, we're in the middle of an important plot point.
No, Shelley, I don't want to talk about this.
His wife wants a divorce. That's what she just called him about. And he says stuff like, everything was fine yesterday, but today, now this is happening. And the guy's that sucks really bad. So, anyway, Scott, in his infinite wisdom, gives him this great advice as a great friend.
You're leaving the game?
This is crazy. We've been playing one continuous adventure for 3 years. And now you're just gonna flush it all down the toilet?
What else can I do? We barely see each other as is.
But we're almost to the Hall of the Goblin Queen.
Just hope she'll still talk to me.
Of course she will. She sent you the gnome to give you the map.
Not the Goblin Queen, Scott, my wife!
Kenny, wait. Just hear me out. We've known each other a long time. And I say this as a friend. Shelley's a bitch.
We move into this next scene, which isn't super important. Here's what it establishes. First, Scott is a delivery guy for like a donut place, okay? Then second, this scene, he's still trying to like get a new player, so he's like interviewing someone. But it comes to nothing in the end. But this scene is almost perfect because he says things that I greatly I appreciate him saying these things, but the way he says them and how he ruins it at the end, like this is what he says is why we play role-playing games, Like it's there's obviously more to it than just this, but anyway, I will show you what he says. Here you go.
When we play tabletop RPGs, we are reawakening one of man's oldest traditions.
Games.
No. Communal storytelling. So we sit at the table, building worlds, building characters, building heroes. Seeing through them as through a prism, our own fears, our own goals, ourselves. Think your Xbox can do that?
I don't have an Xbox.
Good for you.
I play World of Warcraft, though.
But then he ruins it by saying this.
Let me tell you something. MMORPGs are garbage. Take your character sheet and go back to Farmville!
Then he's gonna take donuts to a game store, which is where he used to work. So this dynamic is kind of important later, so I'm gonna explain it to you as best as I can now. This person named Pete is now the assistant manager of this game store. Scott used to be the assistant manager. Pete took his place. And Pete is very Pete's doing a good job, and Scott's constantly trying to put him down. So they are fighting with each other anytime you see them in the movie, till later near the end when they try to make up and then all hell breaks loose. But we'll get there. But it's this is Scott's dream job. As a gamer, he wants to work at a game store. That'd be perfect for him. But he's not good at it. So yeah. So anyway, he delivers donuts to them. Pete kind of rubs it in Scott's face that he's doing a better job.
Say, wasn't that right around the time that Huey fired you and made me assistant manager?
Pete also mentioned something pretty important. They're doing so much better at the store now that they actually got this gaming legend guy named Greg Goran to
Greg
come to
Goran
the
is
store
coming here?
and give a Q&A
Just got this
soon.
in today.
That it hasn't
Thought
happened
you might
yet.
want
It's
to be
going
the
to happen
first to
soon.
know.
How the fuck did you get
Now, Greg
Goran?
Goran is Scott's
He's
childhood hero, I guess. He made games that Scott enjoys or something like that. I guess it's supposed to be kind of Gary Gygax, maybe, something like that. So Scott is now, he's just flabbergasted that they even got this guy because he's been in like retirement for a long time and hasn't made a public appearance in a while. But Scott's also super like jealous that he's not still working at this place. All types of bad emotions. But then a ray of hope shines into this film, which so far has been a pretty meh experience, pretty bleak, not much going on, and a totally unlikable cast of characters. But suddenly, here comes Miles.
What kind of games do you guys host here?
Now, another problem I have with this movie is that Miles is supposed to be the bad guy. Miles is probably the most likable character in this movie. You'll see why, but Miles comes in, alright, and he comes over and he's looking for a new game. Perfect for Scott's game. Scott kind of pulls Miles away and is like, hey man, this is an opportunity of a lifetime for you. We can work out a deal here, my friend. Want to join our game? It's a homebrew, my own system that I made, which is similar to Dungeons and Dragons. You want in? And so Miles, in his infinite wisdom, is like, sure, yeah, definitely. So now Miles becomes a pretty integral character, and I guess what you're supposed to do is, it's supposed to be, Miles is the tipping point for Scott. Miles is what begins to unravel Scott's world. Because Miles is a nerd, like all the other nerdy characters, but Miles is not a super, but Miles, is super cool at the same time, and he's successful and has done all these things that Scott and all of his friends wish they could have done. So Miles comes into Scott's life, and all the friends are elated that this cool guy is wanting to play with them. But Scott just sees an enemy, or a big threat to his entire presence in the movie and his existence, pretty much, as their gang leader and dungeon master. And you'll see how that transpires, but he's kind of the hair that's going to break the camel's back here. So now this next scene, Miles comes over with beer, and he's super cool and being nice, and it's just totally not what Scott had in mind for a good time. So at the start of this scene, the guys are saying this stuff about spaceship speeds.
Gosh, Martin, you're not listening to me. The Millennium Falcon is a broken down smuggler ship.
Yeah, but...
No. The Enterprise is a Federation starship. Now, which do you think would be faster?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
All right. Mickey's a mouse, Donald's a duck, Pluto's a dog. What's Goofy?
And another problem I have with this movie is that it's marketed towards people who like these types of games, and yet the majority of the jokes are, haha, look, they're nerds. Aren't they hilarious? So here Miles talks about how he has a girlfriend, and no one else at the table knows what that's like. So he says to them that he's tired all the time.
For my girlfriend. She wants me to come home. I know what she wants. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's absolutely beautiful, but I'm always exhausted.
I just love what this one guy says.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That's the worst. So now they've finished playing their game, and it's kind of nighttime, and Scott is having Wayne sleep over with him. Another thing that this movie tries to perpetrate is that all nerds are still children trapped in adults' bodies, and Scott is just a complete, man baby, I guess you could say. Which is so not true. I've met many people who are nerds and geeks, and none of them are this stereotypical. This is a movie that was kind of... And keep in mind, okay, I've mentioned multiple times that, this is the worst D&D movie. It's not a bad movie. It's actually a pretty interesting movie, which I wanted to talk about. That's why it was interesting enough to me that I decided to make a video about it. I just don't really like all the ideas it's trying to convey to the viewer. You know what I mean? It's so they're looking at, who's their target audience? They're looking at nerds. They're looking at geeks and nerds, people who like Dungeons and Dragons. But then the entire movie is just poking fun at geeks and nerds and people who like Dungeons and Dragons. And it's not even, in a lighthearted way. It's pretty straightforward, blatant, explicit, almost malicious the way that they are portraying all nerdy people. So anyway, while Scott and Wayne are having a sleepover, Scott tries to make Wayne feel bad about, like, a girl that he likes. All right, so Wayne likes this girl, and Scott's like, no, you do terrible with her. She built an image in her mind of someone handsome because they have, like, an online relationship, and when she meets you, it's going to be a total disaster. So, of course, Wayne, being Wayne, listens to him. It's like they're supposed to be best friends. Scott is the worst. And he's our main character, and we're supposed to feel something for him. But then something else happens. And this is maybe the most uncomfortable scene I've ever seen in any movie ever. Like, oh my God, what is happening in this? So I'm just gonna play most of this. Here you go. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, Wayne, you have a huge zit on your face.
I know.
Let me get it for you.
No.
Come on, it's ready.
No, it'll scar. No, I don't want you to. Get off! Come on, get off!
Come on, I'm not gonna let you walk around with that on your face. Come on.
Oh, wait, my glasses. Ow!
Oh, God. Oh, good.
Forgive me. So then they sleep over, and in the middle of the night, Scott's grandmother, Wanda, has a stroke.
What was that?
So they take her to the hospital, and he gets a call from his mom. His mom wants to move over there from wherever she's been living. Apparently they're not in contact and haven't really talked to each other for a long time, and she lives far away, but she's going to come over because her mom just suffered a stroke. He doesn't want her to come over because it would mean he has to clean the house.
I'm not being selfish.
You wish.
So true to her word, now Mom is here, and her name is Barbara, and she's here with her third fiance, Bob.
Come here and give your mom a hug. Come on. Oh. Scotty, this is Bob.
Hey, buddy, it's so good to meet you. Your mom's told me a whole lot about you.
Like what?
Well, you're her son, and you...
What imaginative names, Barbara and Bob. They'll be perfect for each other. We learn that she's going to get married to Bob, that she's going to be here for a while, she has interest in the house, and the grandmother kind of exposes that she was in a sex cult at one point.
We're getting married.
Third time's the charm. You know she was part of a sex cult, right?
Mother! First of all, that was ages ago, and secondly, it was an agricultural commune.
Anyway, so then we cut to Scott, and he's in his room listening to more angry music, and he's playing with his action figures.
Lord Helmet, Black! You're needed on the bridge, sir. Knock on my door! Knock next time! Yes, sir. Did you see anything? No, sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again. Good!
And when I saw this movie for the first time, I was with my mom, and I remember saying, this part could have been so much cooler. Like, when we first heard that this was a movie that was, like, about D&D, my idea of a really good movie about D&D would show the actual, like, action that's going on in our imagination, right? So when you're playing the game, you're being creative and using your imagination to play out scenarios or whatever. So then he gets up the next day, his mom's fixing up the house, he's abrasive, as he always is.
Mom! Barbara! What the hell is going on in there?
But then she's really mean back and says this to him.
God, you sound just like you did when you were 10. It was that tone of voice that made it easy for me to leave, you know?
Which is the beginning of a shift in tone of this movie, which I've already mentioned multiple times is pretty serious and doesn't really feel too much like a comedy. But starting from this point, it switches from a comedy to more of a melodrama. he has everybody trying to hurt him. And he's just so aggressive and angry and abrasive and painfully immature that he can't figure out how to cope with anything. And he's so spoiled. But at the same time, is it really his fault? And as this movie progresses, it almost becomes a snapshot into the mind of a pretty disturbed individual, which I'm not sure if that's what the developers were, or not the developers, the directors were going for, or the writers, but it's interesting. And maybe if they'd marketed the movie as that, as like a look into the mind of a guy who like can't get his head out of this game, who was kind of a monster created by these bad influences of like his parents and just the world around him, and how no one kind of forced him to grow up and get a life, that he's been enabled and has been taught to be who he is. But that's not what the movie's marketed as. It's supposed to be a comedy for geeks and nerds to enjoy. So, yeah. Scott is almost unable to play his D&D game because his mom doesn't want him playing it in their house. But then Miles comes to the rescue and invites them over to his place. So they all head over there. Miles is such a great guy. And so he goes in, and Miles has a pretty girlfriend, which of course means that Scott can't pick his job off the floor while he's in her presence. So Miles shows off some comics that he made to the rest of the gang, while Scott kind of sits down on the couch, and then Miles' girlfriend, Kendra, comes up to him and tries to talk to him. She mentions earlier that she likes nerdy guys, thinks they're sexy. So she tries to give him like a palm reading or something, she says she's studying in school how to learn about people's personalities from their palms. Hello, welcome to Jean-Ric Collage. We're going to need you to sign a few things here and also tell us what you want to be majoring in. And all right, perfect, thank you. Palm reading. That is totally a valid degree to want to get. Perfect. Okay. Now, before we continue, we're going to need to put this hat on you to figure out what house you're going to be in. So this is another moment where the movie tries to let us into the psyche of Scott. Her palm reading antics kind of reveal that he's supposed to be like sensitive and a romantic at heart. So Miles is talking about his comic, and Scott tries to upstage him by claiming that...
You know The Matrix?
Scott, shouldn't we get the game started?
You mean the film with Keanu Reeves?
You know who wrote that?
The Wachowskis?
Tell him, Wayne.
Scott.
Tell him.
Scott wrote a story like The Matrix.
I didn't write a story like The Matrix. I wrote The Matrix.
That's right. He wrote The Matrix. Scott wrote The Matrix. My goodness. Also, I just wanted to let you guys know something, and this is pretty crazy. A while ago, I went back in time, and I had a conversation with J.R.R. Tolkien, and I just told him about this idea that I had, like this cool fantasy world called Middle-earth. So Scott is claiming that he wrote The Matrix, but then Miles kind of looks at him and kind of breaks apart his argument and says that it would have been impossible for them to make a production that big in the amount of time that he gave them. He just gives a few different reasons why it's pretty impossible for The Matrix to have been originally written by Scott and a story that he had. And so then Scott rants about film critics. He says this.
Well, of course they're not gonna admit it. You obviously have no idea how Hollywood works.
Scott.
That's the problem with film journalism right there. These so-called film critics who just want to be buddy-buddy with the big shots, and they forget about the real artists who are getting stepped on.
But good luck with your comic.
It's like he's calling me out right now. It's exactly what we're doing right now. But you know what? Surely Scott will eventually learn something from all of this that he's going through, right? I mean, there's got to be character growth or else the movie had no point, right? Right? Now, this next part is so difficult for me to watch because I am a role player. But anyway, Scott is going to be game mastering this game at Miles' house. It comes down to a situation where Miles doesn't really want to do exactly what Scott is trying to force them into. He's trying to keep them on one path. He's railroading them, basically. And Miles is like, you know what? I just want to kill this guy, and we can take it from him, the item that we need. Whereas Scott was like, all right, you have to go... To get this item from me, you need to do all this different stuff and go on all these side quests. And he's like, you know what? Screw it. This guy's being a jerk. Let's kill him and take the stuff. Okay? So, Scott gets pretty annoyed by this, and so he sets what in the gaming world is almost an impossible goal. He says, all right, the only way you can succeed at this is if you get a nat 20, or a natural 20. So normally for Dungeons & Dragons, one of the main dice that you roll, or die that you roll, is a 20-sided dice called a d20. If you roll a 20, then that's a natural 20, okay? So it's a 1 in 20 chance for him to succeed. Miles rolls the dice in this epic moment that most gamers, if they've played enough, they will know.
But you'll need a 20 to hit.
I'm feeling lucky. 20! Oh, shit!
Give me a break.
And 20 is the mortal blow, right? He has to do a stamina check or he's dead, right?
You got the natural 20. It's one of the most fun, a very fun thing about like the combat or the rolling in this game is when you get like that best thing and you're like, yes! It's a beautiful moment for the players. And this frickin' GM ruins it for them. So Scott, instead of letting the players have their great moment together like a good game master should, he actually fudges a die roll behind his screen and then is like, all right, now my character's gonna kill Miles' character. Unbeknownst to Scott, though, Miles' girlfriend Kendra was right behind him, and she saw what he actually rolled and calls him out on it. She says, hey, you're cheating. So then Scott's response to that is to try and like gaslight her and everybody else and say, oh no, I wasn't. You don't even know how to play, Kendra, blah, 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 blah. But eventually, after his friends ask a couple more times, what was it really? He ends up saying, yes, it was, I cheated, okay? It's my job as the game master to make sure things go smoothly according to plan.
So what if it was? I'm the game master, and it's my job to make sure the game runs smoothly, even when people intentionally try to mess it up.
I'm not trying to mess anything up. I'm just trying to have a good time.
You may have these guys fooled, but I can see right through you. You like to be the big fish, don't you? Come hang out with all the losers so you're the coolest guy in the room, right?
Look, if you think you and your friends are losers, that's your problem, not mine.
He's putting words in my mouth. You can't trust him, guys. He's not your friend.
The arrogance in that statement is mind-boggling and just so, like, you can't ever have fun playing with a person like this. It's so painful to watch. And I don't know, it feels like a movie made by, like, this movie feels like what a high school jock thinks being a D&D player is. So anyway, then he starts yelling at everyone, and then Kendra just looks directly into the camera, just like all professional actors do. Then finally Kendra asks Scott to leave because, you know, he's screaming and just being a bastard all around. But he has the nerve to try and tell his friends, all right, come on, let's go. We're all leaving if I have to go. And most of his friend group are like, no, you know what? We're staying here. Wayne is this close to being a follower again.
Wayne, come!
He's such a follower. Man, that is his character trait this entire movie. But he experiences a little bit of character growth. He gives Scott his character sheet and tells him, just leave.
I'm sorry,
He's
Scott.
not going with him. So Scott's gonna leave alone. But not before trying to get his friends to leave again.
Come with me now, and all is forgotten.
And again.
And everyone gets 500 experience points.
So now Scott goes home and he's fantasizing about killing Miles.
Sweet ends up, the gods demand retribution! Yeah!
My God, wow. He's a lunatic. He's a psychopath. He's insane. So, this next scene is a little bit, I guess, confusing, so I'm going to try to summarize it. Barbara, Scott's mom, wants to sell Grandma Wanda's house. The reason for that is because she has accrued a lot of debt and wants to get rid of it before her husband, Bob, finds out about this debt. Now, Wanda promised Scott that he would be able to have the house when, she passed away or no longer was living in it. But now she thinks that she's going to give the house to her daughter so that she can sell it and pay off her debt. Now, Scott doesn't like that. Not one little bit. So he just, says some more arrogant BS to the grandmother, which is just... This right here just perfectly summarizes his character. How unaware and unlikable this main character is.
But that's not fair. I've been taking care of you all these years, putting up with your
Excuse me? Who's taking care of who? How much rent do you pay, huh? Who buys all the groceries?
Finally, Grandma shows him who's boss and throws a remote at his head.
Yeah, wasn't he a drunk too?
Ever talk about your grandfather like that?
So he goes back into his room and he looks at one of his books. He sees the name Greg Goran, which we remember was his childhood hero from before. And he remembers that Greg is going to be giving a speech soon. So he decides that now he needs some type of inspiration in his life, so he's going to go meet Mr. Greg and try to...
Mr. Goran?
I don't know what. He wants to meet him. Now, people say you shouldn't meet your heroes for a reason, and this is seen as a perfect example of that. He walks in. So Scott ends up asking him about whether it's possible for a game master or GM to take the game too seriously, as his friends previously insinuated when he cheated earlier. They talk about it for a little bit, and Greg at first almost seems to agree with him, but then he cuts him off and says, at the end of the day, it's just a game. And then things get pretty interesting. So Scott just gets really angry and just, blows up and yells at everybody. And Pete rightfully asks him to leave. He's messing up this presentation with this guy who's probably a childhood hero for Pete too. And then Scott says this.
This guy doesn't know how to run a game store. The only reason he's the assistant manager is because he's f***ing Huey's ugly-ass sister.
And then we find out why Scott was fired in the first place, as Pete retorts with this.
Well, at least I didn't let the cash register get robbed because I was in the back room jerking off to anime.
So yeah, it's not looking too good for Scott. He leaves disgraced and humiliated and runs out of the store. Obviously, he's not getting that job, Like, this character, by this point, he should, even if he has been enabled this entire time by his family, he's now interacted with other people like Miles and seen his success and how cool or whatever he is, and Miles' girlfriend, and this store manager, and his boss. He has people in his life who are not going to tolerate his BS. He should, by this point, have figured out at least some of these things, right? Apparently not. Okay, we're almost done. God, I really do not like this movie. Like I said a minute ago, it's like if some super popular kid in high school just looked at a bunch of losers playing D&D and is like, oh yeah, This is what their lives are like. I've met many people playing D&D before. They're all different types of people, and it's a creative and constructive activity where you're... I don't understand why all the hatred towards the tabletop role-playing game community in general, you know? And then in, like, some kind of sexist things that they've said about, like, oh, girls don't play D&D. Is there any women playing D&D in this movie? There are not. It's all middle-aged white guys who never grew up. Every single one of them. I've played D&D with men and women before. It's not an exclusive activity. And it's just weird to me because this whole movie is, like, the name of the movie is Zero Charisma. Right off the bat, you have to have at least a little bit of knowledge of D&D to really get into this movie. Then there's a lot of nerdy references and jokes. It feels like it's catered towards geek culture and nerd culture, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure of the exact terminology. And people who probably played Dungeons and Dragons. For someone to make a movie about that and then make the whole movie stereotyping in every negative way you can possibly imagine the very people that the movie's marketed towards, I don't know. I am highly offended by this, so yeah. Thought we could poke fun at it for a little while. Scott's driving home after that whole caboodle with the assistant manager and his childhood hero. And he's just screaming in his car. He's not having a good day, okay? He hasn't been having a good time for a while. His whole world is falling down around him. And he's just very angry, will not take any responsibility for his own actions. He's blaming everybody else. And he's preparing for battle. He gets like some type of leather cloak on. And he heads on over to Miles's house where a party is going on. So here we are, my friends. At long last, we're at the climactic ending. Scott comes, ready for battle. He's about to show these fools just who's boss. So he goes over to Miles's house because he's figured out that Miles is the problem. He's the one who has ruined his entire life. Everything is Miles' fault. So he's having this party, and Scott comes in and he's looking for Miles. And he meets some of Miles's cooler friends. And they end up getting him drunk. They talk to him for a bit. Then finally Miles notices that Scott is there. And he's like, no. Go away. You don't need to be here. So Miles calls up Wayne. Now, earlier in the movie, when Scott was kicked out of Miles's house, Wayne and the rest of the crew stayed behind. And Scott told them, look, you guys are going to regret it. This guy is not like you. You're all losers and he isn't, and he's lying to you and is just not a good friend. I don't agree with that. As I've mentioned before, Miles and I guess probably Kendra as well are the only, and what's the grandmother's name? Wanda. So Miles, Wanda, and Kendra are like the only likable people in this entire movie. Miles was very, very nice to them. And was he was very kind to them, and he took them in and played with them and was just having a good time. And everyone else was having a good time with him. And Scott was the one trying to drag down on everybody. But now the movie is going to try to make us think that because Miles didn't invite Wayne and the rest of them to this party, that Miles is a bad person. So Miles calls up Wayne. And it's like, hey man, I need you to come pick up Scott. He tells him that he's having a party, and then Wayne is like, what? You're having a party? And he's like, oh, without us? Oh no. But then finally he's like, okay, sure, I'll come try to get Scott. But then after a few minutes, Miles just goes in anyway and is like, Scott, what are you doing here? And Scott by this point he's drunk. He's very drunk. And he tries to challenge him to a duel. So then there's this fight sequence. This is so interesting to me. Okay, so then they fight each other with someone else's crutches. Okay, so they each have a crutch, and they're just trying to hit each other. And Scott's like, no, it's just a game. We're just pretending. And then we find out that Miles is apparently good at sword fighting.
You're just good at everything, aren't you, Miles?
Scott takes it too far and really hurts Miles. Miles falls back.
The gods demand retribution!
And then runs up and just sucker punches him. And then kicks him while he's down. So Scott's on the ground. He's all hurt. And Miles finally says he's one of the only people who tells Scott the truth. And he tells him, look, it's your fault that nobody wants to hang out with you. You can be the way you are without constantly putting everybody else down. But no, Miles is the bad guy. So Wayne finally shows up and he sees that Miles knocked down Scott, so he runs at him and like jumps on him and rips out his hair, I guess. I don't know, it's whatever. So then we come to, we're almost to the end. Almost there, my friends. So Scott and Wayne drive home. They're both pretty hurt because Miles threw Wayne off of him earlier on like a table, and now Wayne's hurt and Scott is apparently like half dead, I guess. And Scott finally tells Wayne the truth. He asks him,
did you ever go out with that girl? What's her name?
And then Wayne responds saying, yeah, I went out with her and you were right. It didn't work. It didn't work out. And Scott says, I wasn't right. And then he says this.
I only said that because I didn't want you to have a girlfriend.
Why?
Because I needed someone to be more of a loser than me.
What the heck is this movie? So I guess they kind of needed an ending for the movie, a more satisfying one. So they show us this final scene where Barbara got her house. She got the house, she sold it, and we're also told that her and her husband are already fighting. Grandma Wanda has moved into an old folks home. And with her is Scott, because Scott now works at the place where she lives. And they have a bond. Like, that's the main progression of the story, is that Scott and his grandmother are still kind of close. So Scott goes out, and you see that now, guess what he's doing at this community? He's running games of D&D for the elderly, which sounds awesome in theory. But then he starts to play, and we see that he hasn't changed at all. And it ends with a guy saying that he wants to seduce someone. Scott tells him he needs to get a 20 or higher. Well, then he changes it to a 19 or higher. So I guess he's definitely progressed as a human being, because instead of saying 20 or higher, he says 19 or higher. And the guy rolls, and the dice is moving. It's spinning back and forth. Until finally, we cut, and that's the end. So, to be fair, the movie was still pretty good. It's not a bad movie. It's not a terrible movie. Just because I personally didn't like it doesn't mean other people aren't allowed to like it. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know what you thought. But the main problems is that it has an unlikable main character who just doesn't grow at all. There is no growth. There is no point to the movie. And then someone watching this movie who hasn't played D&D, what is their final conclusion? D&D causes divorce, anxiety, leads to angry devil music. You've got all types of, like I said, stereotypes, but a lot of people actually think these things, you know? Like, I've met people who actually do think these things. I was not allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons because my parents thought it was satanic until we finally did some research and found out that it was, not. So, there you have it. That's Zero Charisma. I hope you enjoyed the video. Before we end, I want to take a look at what other people have to say about this movie. Don't take my word for it. Let's take a look at Rotten Tomatoes and look at some of the movie reviews. And here's another problem I have, and it's spelled out perfectly right here. The reviews seem mixed. We have a lot of people saying stuff like, despite the earnestness of its ensemble cast, Zero Charisma feels surprisingly mean-spirited. Too much of the film feels like wallowing in unpleasantness. By failing to push their galumphing anti-hero towards the self-knowledge he so desperately needs, the directors rob the film of its emotional stakes. Zero Charisma is a comedy by classification, but its cruelties have a way of turning it into a psychodrama inadvertently. The tone is often as abrasive as its hero. But then if you look at the positive critiques of the movie, you start to see a bit of a trend in them. We have Zero Charisma is an excellent example of balancing the audience's perception of a flawed character. Expertly observes the plight of the American gaming nerd and draws it out to its logical extremes. An enjoyable, surprisingly accessible movie about nerd culture that offers a little warmth with a lot of humor. Fun and compassionate. The movie offers a funny human take on a wounded person and the gaming subculture that consumes him. A likably blunt glimpse into the geek microcosm. A flick about tabletop gaming culture. This is what this person actually wrote. This movie is about tabletop gaming culture and the challenges of being a geek in the modern age. So, the majority of the reviews that were positive were people who were saying this shows perfectly what geeks are like. And that is exactly why I'm not a huge fan. Why I kind of hated and found the movie very uncomfortable to watch at times. Zero Charisma. But again, don't take my word for it. Check out the movie if you want. It's not terrible. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is just me. You know? Like, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Or, you know, you don't have to, but it's kind of, it's a thing of, you know, it's just my opinion. And it's just what I thought. I have no idea if others feel the same way. That's one of the reasons I read the reviews, was to see, am I wrong on this? Or who knows? So, anyway, thank you for joining me. This is the first video I've done like this where I've talked about a movie. So if you enjoyed, consider subscribing to the channel. And every time you like this video, Scott's charisma goes up by 1. Let's see how OP we can get him. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you guys soon. Deathstroke 9, out.
I don't like wasting my time on hypotheticals. I deal in reality, okay?